On tonight's program, we ruin the ending of Empire Strikes Back.
The relationship between them as father and son didn't develop until we as fans said, hey, we like this movie, make more of them.
A developer's mission gets put under the microscope.
It's clearly, he's learning the Foundry just like the rest of us.
And we talk about the best places to get names for your characters.
When looking for names of NPCs that are going to appear in my next mission series, I googled what are porn star names.
Join us for the Foundry Roundtable. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is a man who is in no way responsible for KU's 37-point win over Texas Tech, Hippiejohn, who has just disconnected.
So you come up with these in advance, or do you just come off the cuff?
Oh, I have to do it in advance. I'm not that clever.
All right, new plan. If Hippie disconnects again, we'll just put a potted plant in front of him and no one will notice.
Yes.
I am back, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
I think. I'm going to ask somebody who knows more about Skype this week to help me fix my Skype. I'm the only one who has this problem.
Okay, so, say hello. I did your introduction.
Hello.
And the result of a horrible transporter accident, Greendragoon.
I don't even know how to respond to that.
And the current award winner for Reasonable Forum Posts, Markhawkman.
Hi.
Well, yeah, he's pretty reasonable.
He's pretty reasonable. All right, so today we start with actual news. We have a couple of news items. We have original series assets that have been added, consoles, tables, chairs, all kinds of stuff. No walls or ceilings yet, but, still these periodic releases are pretty cool. They should be on the Foundry, I would assume Thursday. Or on Holodeck, I would assume Thursday. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Have you tested them out yet?
I played around with them on Tribble, just enough to kind of get an assessment. I think, while it may not be like the wall, as you mentioned, walls and ceilings that everyone would really like, there's a lot of potential there.
Oh, yeah.
For instance, one of the assets was the warp core of the original TOS Enterprise, and there was two versions. There was one that was complete, had the complete enclosure and the piping that kind of ribs it.
And then
there was a second,
just the piping.
Yeah, just the piping, and then just the room. And I couldn't help but think I could see that room being used, or even just the piping.
Oh yeah. Well, I think kind of what I'm planning to do with it is do some sort of space station with all of those assets. I got a good spot for it, I think.
Another really cool thing I saw that was the vertical grading.
Yeah.
I could see a lot of uses for that.
The one that you see in the hallways.
Yeah.
All the time. So, I don't know. I hope that Zero keeps doing these periodic asset releases. I think that's pretty cool.
Oh, and of course, transporter room.
Yes, the transporter room.
The transporter room is awesome.
Funny enough,
I love it.
It will not fit in any of the pre-made interiors.
Bingo.
Well,
I was about to say I
it'll
love
fit
it,
in that
but
generic Federation interior, won't it?
I tried, and I could not find a spot where it would. If you look up at in the ceiling of the transporter room, the upper portion of the pad is sticking through.
Yep.
Well, it'll still work on those ones that we build ourselves, I suppose.
Yes.
it'll work on things you build yourself. It'll work on probably any outdoor map, anywhere that you don't have a ceiling to worry about, or a place that you're not worried about a ceiling. It's a good new asset for sure.
You could do something like build on the ground and build a little building with a transporter room in it, and then you open it up out into the actual outdoor map.
Yeah,
that could work.
Very true.
You know what you could do?
I just thought of a bizarre idea. Put two of them using the same X and Z coordinates, but different Y coordinates. So that you move the ceiling of the second one down, to have a lower ceiling than the first one.
It wouldn't work because all the walls are included and they would conflict.
You just set it like
you might
0.001 offset from each other.
Yeah. It might work.
That, in both horizontal directions so that you avoid that clipping.
It's definitely worth exploring.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, for me, with the new assets, the transporter room is cool. I'm glad we got one. I'm really sad that it's much bigger than all of the interior maps. I also kind of was hoping more for just a transporter asset, much like we have just a holodeck asset, or that we can. I like that we have a transporter room. But I not exactly the transporter that I was hoping for. However, all those original series assets, I saw that list and I didn't literally jump up and down for joy, but I'm a really big original series fan, and
you're kidding.
Yeah, I'm kidding, right? I saw that list and I was just really, really happy. So transporter room, okay, great, we got one. I wasn't worried about it, beforehand. All those original series assets, woohoo! I'm jumping. So that's my reaction.
Speaking of the original series, you remember the anti-time universe from that one episode of the animated series?
Yeah.
That had some really cool props in it that would be neat to see.
Well, the other piece of news, of course, we have is the announcement of the Foundry Authors Academy. Which,
yeah.
And I hope I'm describing this correctly, is sort of a series of, you'd almost call them sort of interactive lectures, where people are going to be able to do big Skype group calls with authors and sort of learn how to make Foundry missions.
Yep. That's the whole idea.
Yeah. So that's great. Going to be like a 3-week thing starting March 23rd.
That all started from just a discussion that was had in the chat room. I know that it started with saying I see a lot of questions on the forums from new authors, like how do I do this? How do I do that? Whatever. Like I've seen and hear that an interactive environment helps people learn better. I know for me it does. So let's think, and then really, Cerberus Films just really took the idea and expanded. Just went the idea of broadcasting it live and everything else. It looks really great.
Yeah, so. I definitely think so.
I'm definitely looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll get to contribute to it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the whole Foundry Roundtable crew is supportive and will help in any way we need to.
I wonder if I'll be able. Am I still new enough that I can enter and learn? Probably can. Probably.
Well, I was thinking about it on the drive home tonight. I was like, sure, they, if they had asked me to come in as sort of a quote expert, I'd love to, but I'm not entirely sure I consider myself an expert. I mean, I've been doing the Foundry for as long as almost anyone, besides the people who were on the Redshirt server before me. But I'm still learning stuff.
I think for the Foundry, expert is a relative term.
So expert and be damned. We all have some. We all have some skill at something.
I was talking to Commodore Bob on Twitter about this, and he was kind of felt the same way you do, Drogan. Is like, yeah, he spent a lot of time in the Foundry, but he doesn't really consider himself an expert. And I pointed out the fact to him that his mission was at least good enough to get Cryptic to notice and call him in for an interview. I think we all
there's
have
only
something to
a
contribute.
few folks that have ever had that happen, I think.
Yeah, it's not about feeling worthy, it's about whether or not you have something to contribute.
Why don't you go ahead, Greendragoon, and tell us what you have been working on?
Well, the big thing I have been working on has actually been costume. Lots and lots of costumes. My current mission requires that I have, at the moment, 4 different enemy groups, and I need to create enough costumes for each that it doesn't, see the same person over and over again. So that takes a while. I've also been taking big advantage of the import bug and put together a very nice custom security team, complete with armor. I have also recently came to light that the Argalius 2 interior map, which I'm using for my centerpiece custom interior, has serious pathing issues, which means I've got to try and either wait for it to be fixed or move to a different map. And unfortunately, my attempts to move to a different map have produced a very unfortunate Foundry bug. Basically, the map disconnects on testing, and then the Foundry closes.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's
Rough
terrible.
week.
We'll check to make sure all of the components were inside the new map.
Yeah.
Because Argalius 2 has a rather odd set of X and Z coordinates.
Space was listed, and it wasn't giving me any errors.
That could be an error in and of itself.
But usually when you go outside of bounds, it gives you an actual error, and it lists it in the error list. This not give any visible signs until you went to go test.
I've never been able to move objects outside bounds, though, because always whenever I put in a set of coordinates outside bounds, it'll automatically move it to the very edge of the map.
It can't happen if you copy-paste something and it doesn't fit properly. It can push something that extent outside of bounds, and that can cause problems.
I actually had one of the patches do that to me. For some reason, it moved my geometry. I don't know, it was like a month or two ago. And it made because they were doing it was one of those where they were doing a republish, and one of my missions did not republish because for some reason the geometry had moved. I don't really know why. But, I mean, it was an easy fix because we have that group select now. I don't know what I would have done without group select. It would have been really a pain in the butt. Because I was able to select all of the geometry on the map and just move it back to where it was supposed to be. Mark, what have you been working on?
I've been working on playing through the Foundry Challenge mission. I haven't actually been working on building anything since this challenge got into the playing phase.
That's kind of where I've been, in that sort of post-mission publish downtime.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I've also been messing with that import bug in the in the costume editor. And one of the things I've started is something that I had planned to do before I decided to participate in the last challenge, which is go back and remaster my very first mission series, the Descent series, which, I'm going to go through every line of dialogue, fix everything, try and branch out some of the dialogue, not make it longer, but make the things wider with more dialogue choices. I'm going to redo some of the things. Most of it was done with stock maps. I didn't do a lot of custom maps, so I want to go in and do some more customizing of maps and some more fleshing out in a few places. Now that we have that costume import and export, I'm going to be able to sort of make my costumes more consistent across the 5 mission series, and be able to export one copy of a character and use that copy in every mission instead of having to try to recreate the guy each time. Because, of course, these are missions that are from the absolute very first part, very first of when the Foundry was online. They were built without a lot of these options that we have today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And, sorry to interrupt, and I'm going to have one more mission to go along with it, because I'm prepping, and I'm saying this for the first time in public anywhere. There's going to be a KDF follow-up mission that I'm going to release with it, which has a really awesome Klingon courtroom designed by Saber Druid back in the early days of the Foundry. It's just
very
been
cool.
kind of sitting there waiting for me to release it. So I'm going to be working on those. Hippie, what have you been working on?
I've been working on Bajor, and I've been working on asking poor Oliver, Cerberus Films, a ton of questions in the Starbase UGC chat, because I'm trying to use the Bajor map to create a different area in the city of Hathon. So that I'm needing to close off a few of the streets, and I'm working on trying to make that look decent. And I've been working on maps this week, and also have finally, like I said, previously, I had the end of the story written, and now I've gone ahead and plugged in from minute number 1, from mission giver number 1, right through the very last scene where the last button the person clicks will be, finish or end or whatever. I have the storyboard. So, I know what's happening where in every instance. And now, before I actually go trying to plug dialogue and, description and anything else into the actual storyboard, and I don't have the storyboard in the editor yet. I have it on paper. This is the kind of thing that I do when I'm sitting down eating dinner, or that's when I write. I don't necessarily write sitting at the editor, but I'll plug it in later. But it's all there now, and I'm really, really happy with it. There's some at this point, it's all map work. It's making these maps look as good as I possibly can. So,
well, let's move on. Let's see, Mark, what have you played this week?
I played Q400's mission. P. Sutherland's Foundry Challenge mission, SB Kyoto's Wibbly Wobbly Earth, Demons from the Past by Hippiejohn, here, Land of Hope and Glory, which is by Drogan.
You've been playing the Foundry Challenge missions.
Yes. And The Web on the Mirror by Pinecone 3.
So it sounds like you've gotten through kind of a lot of them.
Well, that's about a third of them, I think.
There's a lot of entries to wade through.
I imagine that all of us are. I could be wrong, but I imagine that all of us are at least giving the Foundry Challenge missions a play at this point. I don't know. I get through 1, sometimes 2 a day. I'm really glad we have as long as we do to get through them.
I admit I have not played any.
Oh, there you go.
I want to. I don't know if I'll get to it.
That's two manners of thought on that. As someone who is entered in it, do you play them all and vote on one? That's, when I had an entrant, I made it a point to play them all. When I don't, I'm doing 1 or 2 a day, hoping that I get to all of them. And if I don't get to all of them, I probably won't put in a vote. If I have not played all of them, then I won't, then it's not fair of me to vote for one that I did play if there's, one that I didn't. So
I don't know. It's something I want to do, and especially because I don't expect to win, so I want to make sure that I go and vote for one that I would like to win. But like I said, I'm not sure if I'll get to it. So, Hippie, what have you been playing?
What have I been playing? Well, like Mark, I've been playing a lot of the challenge entries. I've said in a couple of places and a couple of times is that I don't want to talk about them too much. Don't really need to go into the why. Although anyone that, if you see my name pop up with a little review in the little review box, taking the time to play through the entirety of every mission. I'm more than, those little boxes are not enough space to really tell you what I think. I pretty happily listened to the recent Zeronius Rex interview. Tell you why in a second, because you guys know that I hate the star rating and all of that. So anybody whose mission I play, ignore my star rating. I do the best I can to make it somehow make sense. I may be one of the only people in the world who uses 2 and 4 occasionally.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but I mean,
4 is my most used.
So I guess what it comes down to is the fact is, I'm playing them and I'm willing to give certainly a more in-depth criticism. I admit that I'm a harsh reviewer. I like what I like and I don't like what I don't like. And, but I always try to, I always will try to couch what whatever criticism I have with making it constructive. Like, here is something you can do that would change this thing that I'm critical of. And whether it's something you choose to do or not, I just like to, as a critic, present what would change the thing that I'm being critical of. So I'm always going to try to be constructive, and I'll always I've already had one person send me a private message via the forum saying, look, yeah, I'd like to have have a more critical look at mine and tell me what you think. And so when I played that person's mission, I went through it, and I sat there with a notebook. It's something I don't do with most missions. If somebody asks me to be critical of their mission, I'll sit there with a notebook when I play it. And
Notepad.
yeah, and so I'll send certainly a more detailed review of why I feel the way I do, and why I everything in general that I have played thus far has been really up and down. Quality varies. I saw Mark say that. You said that on the forums.
Yep.
The quality varies. There's a whole lot of different kinds of missions. Some have been entirely what I like to play. Some have been entirely what I like to play. Though I also, when I'm playing a challenge mission, what was the challenge? What was Brandon's challenge to us as authors? I look for who did that, who followed through on the challenge and made a mission that applies. So there you go. Send me a private message, and I'll say more about your missions. And overall, I've certainly been having fun playing them. As far as non-Foundry challenge missions, I'll admit I haven't been playing any of the less played ones, although I've been making a list of some of the ones that I would like to play. And the thing that I have been playing is going back over some old favorites and just kind of replaying them because I wanted to. So, and doing it because it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun to go back and especially if somebody has done some changes.
Especially for me, my all-time favorite just got featured. So every day I can play my all-time favorite mission and get a ton of dilithium and everything else just for playing my favorite mission in the entire game. So
now
huzzah!
Which one is that?
The Infinitesimal Frontier.
Ah, yes.
It's that and Alimax City of the Polmari tie for my two all-time favorite missions in the entire game. Cryptic content, Foundry content, anything. That includes the recent 3rd anniversary mission. Those two missions, the Infinitesimal Frontier and City of the Polmari, are my top two things that any player who plays this game should play.
All right, Dragoon, what have you been playing?
Well, the mission I actually chose to bring up this week is one I actually played a couple of weeks ago, and I've not had a good opportunity to bring it up because we were reviewing Chico Chavez's mission last week, and it just hasn't worked to bring it up. But a couple of weeks ago, Cryptic Frost, who is the QA dev who has been very nicely been keeping a close eye on the Foundry bug forums. He let it slip that he had actually published a mission, a KDF mission called Chronos Noir. And as you guess from the name, it's kind of meant as a bit of a, I want to say mystery, but exploring the seedier side of Klingon homeworld. So basically, the story is written geared primarily towards Orions and their integration into the Klingon society. So it kind of assumes a little bit that you're something along those lines, that you're less a honorable warrior and more of some quick money. So basically it has you you meet up with this Orion contact, and they want you to go find this figurine. I've no doubt that this is a reference to the Maltese Falcon. And so, but you also are told that you have some competition. It's kind of funny because it gives you options, like to take it a more aggressive approach. And it always ends with him in threatening that, sure, you could kill me, but then you could never find the figurine. And so it's kind of funny because, on the KDF side, I play a Pharassan, who's not necessarily all that interested in, honor or anything like that, but will definitely gets annoyed quickly. So with something like a Ferengi, she would almost always pick the "I'll just tear your head off" option. So that in this mission, that option almost always would lead to a failed dialogue, and you'd have to restart. You eventually end up having.
Something I tend not to do a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Is make people restart a dialogue, but
Well, I mean,
it's sort of a choice that kind of up to every author.
You eventually end up breaking into this one. You find out that the figuring has actually already been delivered to the employer of the competition, or the competing party, and so you actually have to go break into this Klingon house and steal the figurine and then escape through the sewers. He does some cool stuff where your ride is you have to actually go up to the Klingon station where the shipyard and whatnot is and talk to someone there who then hires a disreputable captain to take you. And of course, when you get back from the mission, he turns on you and you end up having to take out his crew. But yeah, he makes very good use of transitions between cryptic maps and custom maps. And there's a lot of stuff that happens on the Klingon social maps. His map design is not what I would say. It's not grand or particularly complex, but for the most part, it serves the plot. My only complaint in this category was you use these maintenance hallways, and the way he set it up, I think it's supposed to be meant sewer, but he just used some normal Klingon hallways with a couple of some flies or something added, and I really think this is a missed opportunity because he could have, if he had been willing to build a bit of a custom setup, he could have done something like on an ocean map and make the sewers appear to be flooded, and something like that would have really sold that particular aspect. The other reason I
think Cerberus Films did something like that, didn't he?
Yeah, and I was thinking this was going to. The other reason I thought this was a good idea was because he uses Klingon interiors a lot. Sewer is a Klingon interior. The bar is a Klingon interior. Just about every map.
You mean it's just the one of those 2 or 3 basic, or what is it, 4? Yeah. Just those 4 Klingon interior 01, 02 maps.
I think the Klingon house is the reuse of the interior. What's that one where you fight the tournament and for the House of Martok?
Okay.
And he actually uses that one to great effect because you kind of got to do a bit of sneaking around, and he uses a lot of NPCs set on timid, so you have the option to shoot them, but they'll attack you if you do. And then you got to be careful because sometimes targs will just attack you because they won't be set to timid. So he thought that map he used pretty well. But yeah, but like I said, it's a decent.
I didn't think about using that timid creature to do stealth missions.
Oh yeah, in fact,
I like it.
I made a big deal when it first came out that this was the key to doing Borg interior missions, where they don't consider you a threat until you actually fire on one of them.
Yeah,
for that.
I've been thinking about Borg missions honestly since the change to timid. I think you're 100% right on that.
It's definitely going to benefit from that.
So, like I said, I gave it a 4-star. Kirkfat, who happened to review it just before I did, wasn't quite as nice to it. But I figured, it's clearly, he's learning the Foundry just like the rest of us, and it's a good first mission. It's not City of the Polmarie or anything, but it's definitely clear that he's trying, and devs developing in the Foundry is something I strongly encourage. This is only the second dev that I'm aware of that we've seen actually develop a Foundry mission.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as I know.
At
least that they've told us.
Zeronius did one, didn't she?
Did she? I'm not aware of it.
Was that, or was it somebody who is no longer there?
Oh, H2O Rat did one.
That's right, H2O Rat.
Oh, okay.
Is he still there?
I don't know. I haven't heard from him in a while.
If I'm not mistaken, you'd have to find it online as I understand it. I could be wrong. Somebody double check me on this, in the online chat with someone who's there. I believe he's really sick, actually. There's an online effort to get money to assist, actually. I'm not I'm not sure of the details, so let's find those out. But I believe that's H2O Rat. So.
You're not confusing it with Heretic, who had
No.
the problem with his leg.
No, I'm not.
Oh, well, that's
No,
right.
this is something different.
I had in my head that might have been Jay Heinig.
That was Jay Heinig that had the problem with his leg, I think.
Yeah.
Could be wrong.
Well, whoever is sick, everybody go support them.
Especially if they've made Foundry missions.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I've been playing. I just kind of stumbled across this one. A guy had posted about it in the forums in the mission area. It's called Desperate Prey by DJF021. And I was actually the first person to review it. Obviously, I can't know if I'm the first person to actually play it, but the first one to review it. And it's not his first mission, but it's an early mission. It's fairly simple. He kind of went back to an old episode of TNG, which is called, I believe, Disaster. It's one where the Enterprise runs into a quantum filament and gets disabled, and the crew has to get it running again to save everybody's lives. So he kind of went back to that, and he set it aboard your own ship. He adds a few interesting twists, which is great, which is kind of what you're looking for somebody who's pulling an homage to an old episode, is you want them to add some new things. It was good use of stock maps, didn't really do too much with customization, but the writing was very good. And I kind of went in depth with him about some things, made some suggestions, I hope good ones. The one thing that I really liked about this mission that I wanted to bring up here is after the initial disaster, where everybody's picking up the pieces, he has a spot where you go around the bridge and help with some injured officers and administer some medicine, get people back on their feet, which I thought was great because my character that I happen to be on is one that I've always played as a science healer, and always sort of, head in my head is, okay, she was a doctor before she became a starship captain, so it felt absolutely right for that character. Now, had I been on my engineer, it probably wouldn't have felt so right. But I think there's ways you can make that customization for the different for the different classes. And I think what you would do is, at the very beginning of the mission, or the very beginning of that map, you have some kind of dialogue with, say, like a junior officer who introduces you to somebody and says, he's an engineer like you. And then you give a whole bunch of options that say something like, no, I majored in tactical, or no, I majored in science. And then you trigger different things to spawn based on your responses to that. So you have the player tell you what class they are, and you spawn different things for them to do much, much later in the map. But I think it was a very fun mission. It wasn't strenuous, but this is somebody who seems to have writing down, seems to have the polishing of the mission down. Once they start getting into really customizing and making the maps really their own, making them really shine, I think this is somebody to look out for.
Cool.
So, now we're into the roundtable portion. So, who would like to go first?
Well, something we've talked about a lot lately is story, and I thought it might be worth kind of touching on some of the actual guidelines and theories behind telling a story. Obviously, it's something that people have been doing for thousands of years now, and there's actually a lot of guidelines that have been developed. Been around for centuries. That I was hoping that
everybody breaks.
Yeah, well, they're guidelines.
They're guidelines,
but
not rules, right?
For someone who is just starting into it, though, they can be a very useful tool.
One that I just thought of is something I heard from an interview with J. Michael Straczynski. Plan the end of the story before you write the beginning, because that way you're less likely to get lost in the middle.
Yep, that's my favorite writer advice that I've ever read.
One of my favorites that I read is somebody said somewhere once, and I can't remember who it was, is that fiction is taking realistic characters, putting them in an unrealistic situation, and having them react realistically. So, that's kind of how I write for the genesis of how I write for bridge officers, which is, I try and have them react realistically to whatever situation they're in, even without knowing if the player has put a personality onto their bridge officers. Try and feel like, what would somebody say in this situation, and go with it, even though the situation is completely unrealistic.
Well, actually, I remember one from Mark Rosewater, who does a lot of stuff for Magic the Gathering. Is one of his things is that when you write a story, you need to define the relationship between the hero and the villain. There will always be a relationship between the hero and the villain, even if it's just the fact that the villain wants to kill the hero for some reason.
And of course, the more interesting ones are ones where it's not just that cut and dry.
Yeah, I mean, like for Star Wars example, you have, what is Luke's relationship with Darth Vader? That's extremely complicated, and it takes a while for them to explain that in the story. What is his relation to Emperor Palpatine? That's a bit more simpler and easier to explain.
But becomes more complicated when you throw Darth Vader into that mix.
So we started there with talking about, like, having at the very least, like, parts of, like, one of the reasons to start at the end is to have parts of knowledge of where your story is going, knowing what the relationships between characters are going to be. I mean, when you talk about Star Wars, that's one of those examples of, Lucas thought he was making one film. The relationship between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader was literally supposed to be a guy in white, in white robes all of the time through the whole movie, and a guy, in a black suit with a black helmet that vaguely resembled a samurai helmet, because Lucas had a fascination with that. The Hidden Fortress, for example, is where Star Wars comes from. So the relationship between them as father and son didn't develop until we as fans said, "Hey, we like this movie, make more of them." And then he went, "Oh, I have room to develop something." I don't think it was planned.
Lucas wrote the books before he made the movie.
No, not that I know of.
I always thought, what I had heard is that he had kind of, rough outlines of some of the other, some of the things that had happened before and some of the things that were going to happen after the original story.
I mean, I think whenever we tell, any of us who tell a story, like any of us who publish a part one of something, we have, at the very least, we have a rough outline of where it's going. But unless people respond really well to the film or the story, might not go anywhere. I mean, upon its initial release, Star Wars was not called Episode 4 A New Hope. Star Wars was simply called Star Wars, because that's all they knew they were going to get.
Even though in the opening it says Episode 4 A New Hope.
No, it doesn't.
It says
in the
that
initial
now,
theatrical release. It says that now. In the initial theatrical release, it was just Star Wars a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Like, it's really interesting that that was all added in later. Those movies have been changed so much over time. All that was added in later to add to the layers of story that exist once he had a chance to put more in it because people responded.
But that's sort of different from how J. Michael Straczynski wrote Babylon 5, because of course he knew exactly where it was going.
He wrote the last he has said that he wrote the last episode first. I infer from the way that he talks about writing that he wrote that last scene first. He knew exactly how it was going to end before he even started the pilot.
And isn't there even a line somewhere way earlier in the series where it says, "How is this?" One of them, Sheridan asks the Vorlon, "How's this going to end?" And he says, "In fire." And that's how the last episode does end.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you know the story of that last episode, right?
Which, the Sleeping in Light?
Yeah, it was actually filmed at the end of season 4.
Yeah, it had to be because he didn't know if he was
They
getting.
didn't know if they were getting season 5, even though he had stories for that.
He had
Well,
some stories. I mean, but not.
the way I understand it is that Straczynski also wrote out story outlines for the entire series run of Crusade, even though they never actually went beyond like the first 1 or 2 seasons of Crusade.
It didn't even make it one season.
It was
Yeah.
like 8 episodes. Honestly, I loved
it was
Babylon
less than
5.
Firefly.
Crusade was bad. I loved Babylon 5.
It's one of those things where you would have loved to have seen it go on for a little bit and find its footing, if it could. But
If it
I
could.
thought Crusade was good. I liked the idea behind Crusade, but it definitely needed to, I guess you could say, build momentum.
and it was a bit cheesy.
So here's an unfortunate thing, and to swing it back around to Trek, because hey, we're a show about the Star Trek Foundry anyway. So to swing it back around, here's an interesting thing. When the early part of Babylon 5 came out, and I promise I'm going to bring this back around to Trek. It was okay it was at a point in time where shows still had a chance to find their footing. Just like when Next Gen came, when the Next Generation came out, man, some of the first episodes of the Next Generation just awful. They were really bad.
Yeah,
TV.
season 1.
Skin of Evil.
Season 1, and the same thing holds true of Deep Space Nine, some of the early stuff, but all of these things premiered in a space and time where shows had a chance to find their footing, and things were a little bit more forgiving. And movies, audiences gave movies a little bit more time to build momentum. It was a different space and time.
Things weren't declared a failure 5 minutes after the credits rolled.
And Crusade was coming out, and it was another show built along those same lines. It had the long plan. It had it was built like a story should be built, with some exposition at the beginning, and probably if we had gotten to the middle, there would have been some real fun action and character, and eventually we would have gotten to a climax and like a denouement and everything else, and but we never got there because it came out at a space and time where the audience isn't willing to wait for the exposition to be over, and it's why I think the new bringing it all back around to Trek, that's why the new Trek is working, and why we're audiences that were I believe most of us talking right here we're an audience that was raised on the older aesthetic, where we're okay with letting things have their time to build. But we've got a whole generation of people that current people making Trek, I'm talking about the JJ Trek, that the current people making Trek are trying to appeal to an audience that demands that exposition happen while the action is happening, and that action and that adventure and that very visceral wham 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 wham, something is always happening, is going on. It's a different audience, and Crusade came out right at the beginning of when that sort of new aesthetic of storytelling started to push its way.
Hippie, you touched on something that I actually wanted to bring up, and that is the dramatic arc, which is basically a 5 steps in a plot line.
Yeah.
The first being exposition, or along with the inciting incident.
Yeah.
Rising action, where things start to build. The climax, which is where the character reaches some kind of realization or is changed in some way. Moves into falling action, which usually often has a final suspense towards the end, and then resolution, or as you referred to it, the denouement.
Denouement, yeah. It's it's classic storytelling. I mean, that's kind of what I studied when I went to school. Was I studied a lot of various methods of storytelling, and I've spent a lot of years of my life doing it.
I mean, it's something that new Foundry authors may not really know. I mean,
it really is. It's the most classic that I can think of story construction. Like, it doesn't matter what goes into that story. I'm of a big belief that there are only 7 actual stories, just all told a different way. Something I heard once, and I've never seen it proven wrong.
It's just like there's only one country song, and it's all just sung a different way.
Sung in the same way.
But yeah, the idea that you've got to invest people in why they should care about for me, the exposition is, I want to see it kept as short as possible in a Foundry mission. Like,
it's a hard thing to do.
It's a really hard thing to do. But I have a tendency to. But you've got to tell them why what they're about to do is important, and how it affects the things that they care about. That's what the exposition is all about. Or in the case of a novel that they're picking up where they don't know any of the characters or they don't care. They don't have any preconceived notions. That exposition also has to serve as, this is how I get to meet all of these characters that hopefully through the rising action I begin to care about. I kind of think that 5-part stories are some of the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tried and true method.
Yeah. I was definitely conscious of that when I was building my initial series, because of course I was outlining it before the Foundry had even hit Tribble, so I didn't know what kind of limitations or what kind of anything I was facing. So I just knew I had a beginning, I had an end, I had some rough things for in the middle. When I started, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do for episode 4 for number 4 of the 5. So once I had that sort of basic framework, everything else started to fall into place.
Well, so here's the thing,
for new authors to think about.
Yeah, so here's the thing too. We talk about it in terms of a series, and I say that like a 5-part series that addresses all of those, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement, or resolution. That's my favorite sort of series. It's also my favorite sort of constructed story. A television episode most times has 5 little parts broken up by commercials, because you've got your exposition, your rising, you've got all of that, and you can put all of that into a done-in-one episode. You can put it all into a single Foundry mission. You just have to be conscious of, I want my mission to be... It's actually a design consideration. I want my mission to be 45 minutes long. How much time do I give to each of those 5 aspects?
And of course, it's very difficult to measure that time, because you never know exactly how fast somebody's going to play through your mission.
It's not even necessarily how fast they're going to play through the mission. It's a matter of how much weight you give to each part of that method of storytelling. How much weight do you give the climax?
It can have a serious impact on the pacing of your story too.
Exactly, because is the climax longer than the rising action? I'm of the opinion that the rising action should probably be the longest part of your story.
That's what I tend to do.
The second part, the rising action. That's my opinion. Your mileage may vary, obviously.
Obviously. Well, going from sort of big sweeping storytelling techniques and discussion, I'd like to bring it down to something very specific and sort of a fun little topic. How do you guys go about picking character names?
It's funny you should ask that. I've been recently have had to do that a lot. I've kind of settled into a method of, I will go over to StoWiki, find the list of all the randomly generated DOF names based on what my character is, and I will find the species I kind of want, and then I will try and pick a name from that, or at least come up with something based on that.
Wow, you sound all respectable and stuff.
It's really not.
It's a respectable way to say he's stealing.
But you like actually, you're like, I go and look at the actual races and all of that, and when I'm looking for an NPC name, I type in, depending on like, I just type in like random name list into the Google generator or whatever, random Klingon name, and come up with some combination of words. I'm not ashamed to say that when looking for names of NPCs that are going to appear in my next mission series, I Googled what are porn star names, because they're not their real names. Spoiler, it's not their real names. So it's the whole
I'm
aspect.
just totally disillusioned now.
What kind of names porn stars choose, and that honestly, I not ashamed to say that for a part of my new mission, looked up names to use, and it did. Yeah, random name lists on the internet. That's where I get mine.
Yeah. Speaking of fake names, I'll tell you where I've been going lately is junk mail. Junk email. Because I have to assume that all the people that are sending me spam mail for Viagra or whatever are fake names. They have to be.
Probably.
So,
yes.
One of the main characters in my Spotlight mission, Nova Ashby, I got that name off junk mail.
Huh. Nice.
Hey.
I've got a few others saved up as well.
Nice.
I often do names that are homages to something or other, to sometimes a person I know or something like that. But for my, in my previous mission, Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, you'll notice that when you're talking to this one Jim Hadar guy, I think his name was Barak Tiklan. That's actually the name of the Jim Hadar bridge officer that one of my characters has. But for the Vorta in that mission and the Bosliks in my current Spotlight, I actually looked at what the names for members of that race were in the TV show, and I made names that were similar but not exactly the same.
I've done that a little bit.
One of the Boslik characters in Deep Space Nine, well, they never actually said her name on screen, but in the script she was named Rionaj, spelled Rionoj. And so the Ojor and Riodao, I just kind of like changed the consonant to be something slightly different.
But you kind of took some of the same structure,
yeah,
and plugged in some different. Yeah, that's one way to sort of make easy Vulcan and Klingon names, is to sort of take what's been done before. Obviously there's a lot of names that start with K apostrophe in Klingons.
Yeah.
T apostrophe in Vulcan women.
Wait, that's a Romulan man.
Yeah. Usually when I'm doing a Romulan, usually I will look up on the internet lists of Roman names from ancient Rome. One of the things that you brought up a second ago, Mark, is pulling in names from your in-game characters. And so I'm curious, have you guys done a lot of that, or the other way around is taking Foundry characters and making in-game characters for them?
The first way around, no. The second way around, I've considered it.
Well, in Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, I actually played around with the costume import feature, and at the end of the mission, when you get to the final rendezvous point where the diplomatic negotiations are going to take place, you'll see two Starfleet admirals standing there. Those are actually two of my in-game characters imported into the Foundry.
See, that's the thing I haven't done, is I haven't used in-game characters in the Foundry. The thing I've considered doing is something I saw WOG HD do when he was premiering Grisoric City. One time I was walking around Earth Space Dock, and there was a Tellarite wandering around Earth Space Dock just doing his business called, Duck Grisoric. That was the character from that mission. It was his way of, was an additional way on his part, I guess, of like promoting his mission. That
kind of linking the mission to the game world as a whole.
Yeah, that I found to be interesting. Cool. Yeah. And I'm certainly not against seeing someone's in-game characters in a mission. I personally haven't found a use for it with any of mine.
I know somebody who does that a lot is Bazag.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
His Bajoran admiral has appeared in several of his missions, and that's his in-game character.
Oh.
One of them. I know I have gone the other way, where I've taken characters from my Foundry missions and made characters for them in-game, which is kind of funny because one of them is dead. I killed him off in my mission, and then I made a Foundry character for him, or a in-game character for him. So, I don't know. I suppose there's some kind of time travel or alternate universe explanation for that.
I don't know if this counts, but I took my ended up becoming very attached to my Foundry test character, and then created an actual captain based on her.
There you go.
Hey, my Foundry test character's up to level 3.
I'm up to 2.
Mine's been at level 3 for 2 years.
Just high enough
I was
to
just
unlock
glad
the
he got
Steam
there.
I'm 50.
So last week, we mentioned that we would at the very least talk about this idea of a new Foundry sector, or the idea that Dan has had, that he's certainly not said, oh, it's going to happen, but that he said, hey, we floated this idea, we've talked about it, and I think certainly. I know that I certainly have one main concern with it that I heard Zeronius Rex address on her latest interview with Primetime UGC. The fact that there are so many missions in the editor or in the mission list that are things like this is a test mission, please don't play, or exploits. That how could you have a truly random, I arrive at this planet and get a random mission. How would that work? Before I even want, I love the idea. I love the concept of a Founders of the Federation sector, but there's that's the big one for me. Is addressing
one
that.
thing you could do is, instead of getting a random mission, is whenever you pull up to a planet in this sector, you have the option to open a menu that will give you a listing of everything that starts there. So that way you can look through, okay, I don't want to play test, this is a test, or I don't want to play, such and such Captain Mob Rumble, I want to play this.
Mm-hmm.
What about the 300,000 missions that start in the transporter room panel?
Well, we don't care so much about them.
That's exactly why you don't have to worry about exploiters in another sector.
Yeah.
Well,
these would be the only ones that start in that sector.
The thing is, though, is that I actually had my Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant mission do that because of the fact that your character is going to the Gamma Quadrant. There is no door that I could think of that would actually make sense. So what I did for that mission is you talk to one of Jim Pock's aides. Jim Pock's aide tells you to go to this console and plug in some security codes that he gave you, and these security codes will make the Cronus main transwarp gate dump you in the Gamma Quadrant instead of the places that it normally dumps you.
It's clever. Yeah.
Yeah, I joke, but there are plenty of great missions that start at the little consoles on ESD, including the one that I reviewed earlier tonight. But I think it would be it would kind of make you have to go to that sector to get those missions.
See, I think
is
that
cool.
would work for me. Like if it really is a sector that has like Ferenginar and Tellar and Beta Z and
Oh yeah, Trill.
all of those, and Trill and all of those cool planets that I would like to see. Hell, I'd love to just see what Tacofangs, what the environment artists do with something like that. I'd love to just see that. So.
That's assuming they make new assets for that.
If they did.
But and obviously, you'd want a myriad of Foundry doors around there, and maybe some ground social maps that you could start things from. I'm not sure what else you would do with a quote Foundry sector.
Ferenginar would be a fun place to have as a social zone, simply because of the fact that, from what I've heard of it in canon, the planet is mostly mud.
Yeah.
Swamps, mud,
Yeah.
rain. They have something like 30 different words for rain.
Yeah.
Another thought I have is I wonder. I sit back and I wonder where this idea comes from on Cryptic's part. I like it. I do really like the idea. But one of the things I see them accused of sometimes with the Foundry is letting Foundry authors do their work and not actually producing any story, yada, yada, yada.
That one's kind of faceless.
I can see why
if they open up a
think
whole
that,
sector that is based on the Foundry authors making missions for these planets and then being posted into the game, and that's what people are supposed to play, I mean, that's just kind of like reinforcing...
Well, they would have to do it sort of strategically.
Well,
release the Foundry sector at the same time they release some big other thing that they've made somewhere else. You say, okay, we've made this, and we've also put in this for everything that everybody else has made.
Here's two rather interesting bits of trivia related to the Foundry and what the developers have done based on people's Foundry mission. One of the missions where you're fighting the Vat was actually originally a Foundry mission.
Which one?
I forget
Fighting which?
Yeah, one of the missions in the Klingon arc, I think it's the one prior to the one where you fight the Doomsday weapon, but it was originally a Foundry mission from what I've heard. The other one
I
is
don't
that
think I've ever heard that.
I've never heard that either.
Because those were all around before the Foundry came out.
The other one is that they actually made a duty officer based on the Helna character.
That is true.
That is true. Honestly,
But
they
that's one of
have.
those cases.
That's
one of those cases they did that as a specific homage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See that however that would open up a whole new discussion on my part as to what I think they should be giving as actual Foundry rewards, rather than like here have a big pack of pink crystals that you use to buy out that you get everywhere else in the game. Rather than that, I think that Foundry rewards, but only for spotlighted Foundry missions, I think. And yes, I say that having one in the spotlight and seeing other people who have, stuff in the spotlight, like, the character of Helna has her own DOF. I don't know how hard it is for them to make a DOF. I don't have a clue. What it takes to, to make a DOF, ensure that it's balanced, plug it in, and then make sure that it works.
It doesn't seem like it would take a lot.
It doesn't seem like it would be that hard, but I'm willing certainly to admit that I don't know the first thing about what it would take. So, it could take them 5 days to make and test a DOF and get it into the game.
Duty officers, though, you don't really test the balance of that specific duty officer because it's really just like 3 or 4 traits.
Yeah, so for me it's not even balanced because there are some DOFs that have unbalanced the game because of whatever effect they have in ground or space combat or or on ground or space maps, but there are a bunch that don't have any effect.
Yeah, but for this though you wouldn't be necessarily tossing in new one, you'd be using an existing one for a new thing, I guess. Best way to put it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, like, in the case of some that I've played, like take one of the most recent ones. Take Infinitesimal Frontier. Is last week's spotlight mission. Your ship gets shrunk down really small or something. So give them a title. How hard? That I know can't be that hard. It's an example. It's not what I actually want to see. It's an example of, like, what I think needs to happen is that those rewards need to become whatever is simple for them to do. I don't
and
not
something
be,
that's more like fun and creative rather than just currency.
Not being a programmer, I don't know what would be simple for them to do. Maybe it's taking a plasma cannon and in recalling it, Romulan test cannon 057, because that's the name of some weapon that appears in a mission where there's a Romulan base you invade or something.
I know exactly what I'd want for my spotlight mission.
Whatever is the simplest for them. I don't want them to have to, like, sit down and spend an entire, day of work just, hooking up one reward. If it's easy enough to just say, hey, okay, so this mission, even if they don't rename it, but this mission features a lot of Romulans that you defeat, so your reward is going to be a plasma, cannon. It's not a random drop. Just like when you accept a cryptic story mission, it says your reward for it will be one of these. Choose one of these or a current lockbox. That to me is what rewards should be. Is something cool that has to do with the mission. That would make spotlight missions all the better, in my opinion. But
I mean, I know exactly what they would do for mine. Is because
what's that?
There's an animation in game that's a guitar playing animation.
Yeah,
which
that isn't unlocked.
Which is not unlocked, and because my mission is based off a Metallica song,
Yeah.
The reward for playing it should be unlocking that animation for your character.
See, and there it is. It can be things that are already in game.
Wasn't that one of the emotes that was in the C-store for a while?
Apparently.
I don't know if that one ever was. I think it was something that you could do for a while, and for some reason they took it away.
It wasn't.
I think it might have been one of those where it was problematic in some way. Not sure exactly.
I don't know, but you can still make people do it with the Foundry, though.
And there are still people in game who have it as an emote that they got when it was available. I certainly have seen a lot of Klingons who do it.
But you're right.
I think the reason
some fun you can do with spotlight missions.
Actually,
I think the reason that I was going to say
that might be one of those things where if you know exactly what you're doing, you can type a command into the text window and have it do the emote.
Oh, the console commands?
That might be possible, yeah.
Yeah, console commands allow you to do a whole hell of a lot. Especially with cryptic games. Honestly, there's a lot of them.
There's a listing over at StowWiki, I think.
Yeah. I certainly made Champions Online a lot more fun to play using those console commands. So take away the make it look like a cartoon and suddenly that game is awesome.
Of course, bringing it back to the Foundry sector, there's obviously the other sort of thing you could do with it that would be more complicated and more stressful on the devs probably, but you could vet missions and pick which ones you allow to start there. And there's lots of problems with that, but it's certainly a way they could go.
My personal
Brandon already
approach,
does that with the spotlights.
Yeah, Brandon vets the spotlights, but my personal approach is that Kestrel has to be in. Kestrel's the name of the writer, right? That's her handle is Kestrel. Yeah, Cryptic
writer.
Kestrel.
Yeah.
she need, like, if there's going to be a Foundry sector that the Foundry author community gets to do a lot of creating in, there needs to be, like, much like when Next Generation first came out, fans were able to get their hands on them very quickly because they wanted writing submissions coming from all over. A writer's Bible. This is who Captain Picard is. This is what can be done. This is what can't be done. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. And there needs to be something like, coming from Cryptic to all interested parties, if they ever do this sector, to, that says, this is what's up with Ferenginar. And then there needs to be a vetting process for missions that get submitted regarding Ferenginar as to whether or not they follow those mission guidelines.
Or you could do it, you could incorporate the contests into that, the Foundry challenges.
Yeah.
Say we will run a Foundry challenge.
Oh, man.
Set a mission on Ferenginar. We will pick the top 5 and allow you to actually put the door as Ferenginar.
They don't even do it as a Foundry challenge. Don't even invade the space of the Foundry challenge. Just create something new. Be like, here are the story guidelines for what's going on Ferenginar. We're having a challenge. We're going to take the best.
You can do all these things before this sector is actually released to the public, so that these are all ready to go day one.
They'd have to. They would have to do this before. That's another thought I had about it, is they would have to get stuff hooked up beforehand, because they can't just launch an entire update type of thing and have that entire update thing be like, okay, create stuff. Well, unless they launched that and that was full of nothing but bug fixes in every possible asset we could, need. So then maybe I'd be like, all right, that's a good update. Grumble a little bit and, inside jump for joy.
Well, Mark, do you have a topic for us this week?
Well, one thing that I like to do with my missions, though, is I like to explore things from the TV show that didn't get explored in the TV show, like Kirill Prime. If in my Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant thing, the final map you're on, if you look around for this, I hid some stuff on the map, and if you find the stuff I hid on the map, one of your bridge officers will actually come to the conclusion that the planet you're standing on is in fact Kirill Prime. Kirill Prime is the Vorta homeworld.
In writing your story, I think you run into a danger there.
Well, the thing with this, though, is that there's no definitive proof in the mission whether or it is or isn't Kirill Prime. It's just one of those things where you find something that suggests that it might. Well, this sort of thing is also the reason why I decided to have the Bosliks working with the Tholians in my Beta Rana mission, is because, well, the Boslik in the TV show, the only thing we really know about them is that they're not a particularly powerful political entity, but they often work with or for the people that are. So I tossed them in as mercenaries who built the space station for the Tholians.
So when I say I think that you might run into trouble there, what I think I mean is, like, I've seen a lot of people talking about the Bosliks recently, and I had to go look them up. And I'm a Trekkie, or Trekker, or whatever you want to call it. Like, they weren't a thing that immediately jumped to my mind as something that I remembered. And I think that the potential pitfall you run into when you're referencing things that were never explored in the TV show. For example, I never got the reference when I played through Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant. I never caught the reference to the planet, and I don't even I would never personally know what the Vorta homeworld was called. And so I think there's a danger in referencing things that I don't know how familiar is the right amount to reference, because I think familiarity and referencing the past and throwbacks is really important, but there may be a danger in referencing something that the shows never explored, like if they only mentioned it, and that might be why I don't personally remember what the Board of Homeworld was called.
I think you can mitigate. I think you can mitigate the danger by just not immediately assuming that the player will know these facts, and then providing an option.
Yeah, providing an option to get that explained and have that exposition in there.
Yeah.
Have
as an extra dialogue option, maybe.
Say, I don't know, I don't remember that. Can you explain it to me? Or, not in those words, but and then have
like
a
as
bridge
an extra dialogue
say,
option.
Oh yeah. Like you guys remember in Insurrection, where when they're on the way to the Briar Patch, he has Troy and Riker go look up the Sona and go look up the mission so they can brief him. You can have something where your officer comes in and briefs you on what's going on. And
actually, though, that particular scene in Insurrection, that's a very good example of one thing I think is a good thing to do, because I've seen people do it in a lot of Foundry missions as is. I guess from one point of view, you're briefing the player on what's happening. It really, in my experience, it actually does work out quite well. Like in the case of the Beta Rana incident, Beta Rana, it's just some solar system that I made up. So I have to explain to the player what the solar system is, why they're going there, yada, yada, yada. And it's not something that you necessarily need to, do a long-winded explanation of, but, you kind of have to explain the who's and the whys.
Always make it optional. I mean, make either the option to have the BOF or junior officer or whoever explain it to you, and then the option to skip it.
Yeah.
If you know already. Because I think I ran into that when I was making my initial missions, which are Romulan-centric missions. And so, I felt the need to make sure that I explained, because the whole thing is sort of the fallout from what happened with the destruction of Romulus. I made sure I explained, if people didn't know about it, what happened with Nero and the big supernova and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you can skip that if you need to.
Well, in my note, the mission doesn't really require you to need to know who the Bosliks are, but it's just one of those things where it's kind of like I actually use them in much the same way that they ended up getting used in Deep Space Nine. You see this group of aliens who aren't connected to the Federation that are doing something, and the Federation needs to interact with them for however long.
Right on. I mean, I don't think everything needs an explanation, but like, what do they call it when you're referencing back to like
touchstoning?
Touchstoning, yes, yeah. But when you are touchstoning, because like where you're saying with diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, it's a mission to the Gamma Quadrant, and you're calling back to the Vorta homeworld. You're definitely touchstoning on the episode where it was mentioned.
That was just an Easter egg that I did.
Right. It's an Easter egg that even if I found it, I wouldn't understand it. It's kind of like I work with teenagers a lot. It's kind of what I do. I'm a storyteller. and a counselor with teenagers, and they play a video game. And one of the things I do when I'm a storyteller with them is I tell fantasy stories, and it is like a live action role play. And a lot of the kids that I was working with a few years ago were playing that video game, that is three initials it's just very, very exclamation, wow, that's amazing. They would play the heck out of that game, and they had a vocabulary that was attached to that game, that they would bring with them. So being knowledgeable, I guess, on what it is important. So I would learn those things just for dealing with people.
Well, and I can bring in something from my profession as well. Because in journalism, a lot of people say that, you can't assume much intelligence on the part of your reader, that you have to sort of write for the lowest common denominator. And I usually put a more positive spin on that, is that when I'm writing a story about something, I can't assume that the person reading it has any prior experience in the subject. So if I'm writing a story about a city council meeting, I have to write it for the people who have never ever been to a city council meeting and ever read a story about one. So, if I'm writing a story about a particular planet that was in canon, I can't assume anybody's seen that episode who's playing it.
You have to fill in the vocabulary, I think is what I was trying to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is like, I didn't understand what those kids were saying, so I had to fill in the vocabulary for myself. And as Foundry authors, if we're going to be using something that's a touchstone or a throwback, we have to fill in the vocabulary for why it's important.
Yeah.
I would say to make it as well, try and make it an effort where if they still don't quite understand what the significance of, make sure that doesn't detract from the story.
Yeah. And that's a tough line.
In my case, though, for both of them, the way that they were used, if you don't get it, or, if you're just one of those people who simply never heard of the Boslicks before, it doesn't matter if you've never heard of them before.
It's like they're some monster of the week or an alien of the week.
If you give them enough characterization, Mark, I think even if they'd never heard of them before, then still should be okay.
Yeah, then they become important.
Yeah, the interesting thing, one thing I did with them in the story is that I kind of, I tried to have them come across as people who have had enough dealings with the Federation that they know what the Federation will and will not do, which is reflected by a general apathy that they have towards your presence there. Because, you go on the station, you do stuff, and the Boslicks just sit around staring at you like, oh, hi, you're here.
Yeah, so you're kind of trying to subtly impart information about these people's attitudes as you go along in the mission.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good way to do it. You're kind of showing rather than telling, which is kind of nice. And that's kind of something that's hard to do in the Foundry because you're telling a story entirely with dialogue. It is much easier to say, oh, these people are very suspicious of you, than to show them being very suspicious of you.
One example is when you're in there, the head Boslick on the space station, when you eventually find her, she's sitting in front of a computer console working on something, and she doesn't even get up when you go there, and when you initially talk to her, she more or less tells you to go away and leave her alone. Which, it's not the sort of thing that you would expect an alien to do when several people barge into the room unannounced carrying a phaser rifle.
Well, guys,
we're getting long.
So
something I want you guys to think about that I want to talk about next week, or even just hear what people's thoughts are anywhere about it. Klingon missions, KDF missions, are they worth it? The whole time invested versus I guess a lot of it depends on why you're writing the mission. Are you writing it because you love you just love Klingon stories and you love KDF, and just the 10 people that are going to play it and enjoy it it's going to make you happy that you spent 40 hours or 3 months of time putting this KDF mission together.
That's a great topic, and I've got a good one for it. So
I have not. I have personally not been able to motivate myself to put very much work into my KDF project. Either of them. I have, I want to make a KDF version of of my Spotlight Challenge winner that, that fixes a lot of the things that people, didn't like about the one that got spotlighted. And I have another one that's an original story, and I just can't motivate myself to work on the KDF stories because of the factor that I look at even the spotlighted KDF missions, and just comparatively they have so few plays to the Fed missions, and it's really disheartening. And I see people who make what are probably really great missions being like, wow, this mission has 19 plays. I hope you 19 enjoyed it. I'm like, it's hard to motivate.
Which, of course, is the same conundrum that Cryptic is in with the KDF.
Yeah, it is. It's really hard to motivate myself. I have what I think is a really fun story. It'd be better if I had Old School Gorn, but it's even a different kind of story. But hard to motivate myself to work on it because I don't know how many people are going to play it. So yeah, I'd like to hear what other people think about KDF missions.
Yeah, everybody be thinking about that for next time. But for tonight, we will say good night.
Good night.
Good night, Gracie.